Bobić. I'm the principal investigator of the DFG-funded project Judicial Conflict in the Reconfiguration of the EU Constitutional Order.
My name is Kristina Hatas. I am a research associate on this project, and I'm also a PhD researcher at the Hertie School with the Centre for Fundamental Rights.
So this project basically starts from a common intuition in EU studies. When the EU starts regulating something that is a core state power, something that we associate strongly with state sovereignty, our intuition is to expect the member states, and for lawyers especially, we expect national courts to kind of reject and push back on such EU regulation. So what interests us in this project primarily are two things. It's not about whether the EU should or shouldn't regulate this, but priding itself so much in diversity. First of all, the project wants to simply learn about national diversity in criminal law. How have the histories and socioeconomic philosophies of the different member states influenced and shaped their criminal laws? And if the EU does want to intervene meaningfully in this area, how should conversations about this and the management of this diversity look like? The EU always talks about united in diversity, and I think that EU lawyers really rarely engage with that diversity.
I think there are two things that stand out about this project in particular. There seems to be kind of like not a lot of overlap, a lot of conversation going on between EU lawyers and the criminal lawyers. Perhaps something that we can do is to invite a conversation in between these disciplines. The second thing that stands out for me is also how we talk about criminal or punitive systems. In criminal comparative law, there's a lot of talk about punitiveness of a certain system. Is it rather lenient or is it rather more severe? What are perhaps the motivations? But there isn't a lot of comparison in between these logics of punishment. So why does a state punish? What is the objective of, for example, imposing a fine or sending somebody to jail? Since I've been looking more into member states and kind of comparing the national criminal systems, I've had a couple of surprises that I hadn't quite seen coming. One thing that actually shocked me was, and I have to add to this that my parents are Czech, so I know the country fairly well. I was very, very surprised to find out that the Czech Republic is one of the very few worldwide, and to my knowledge, the only state in the EU that still practices surgical castration on sex offenders. This is not without conflict with some bodies of the Council of Europe, and there is some movement and conversation going on here. So this was actually something that quite knocked the breath out of me, that we even have such divergencies in between the member states. Another thing that surprised me, I am following developments, for example, in Scandinavia, where I'm from, and that we have a trend not just to, I think, externalization, for example, borders is a conversation that's being had a lot, and it's a term that many of us are familiar with. What I was not as familiar with was this externalization of punishment, namely prisons. So in Sweden, for example, now there is an ongoing political process that would entail renting prison spaces in Estonia, so that certain prisoners would actually serve their sentences in Estonia rather than in Sweden.
What we see is really also how the EU's very existence, so not necessarily the EU's regulation of criminal law, but the EU's migration policy and so on, affects criminal law in turn. What Kristina also learned about is how, for example, Sweden, which was traditionally a country with low punitiveness, a focus on rehabilitation and really kind of reintegrating the individual, with the rise of migration, now Sweden is going back to increasing punitiveness. The EU doesn't have a coherent vision of why criminal law is important beyond functionally ensuring other EU aims. So there's nothing wrong with harmonizing areas of criminal law, but how to properly do it and acknowledging the diversity that exists out there, that is something that our project can fix.
Shall I?
You shall. I'm not a French press expert.
Smells nice. Oh, cheers.
Cheers.